The housing market just changed forever, at least according to Kevin O'Leary, and I am inclined to agree with him. I believe he's been right on a lot of things recently over the last year or so, especially when it comes to finances, comes to the American economy, the housing market, stock market. There's a few things I've disagreed with him about. Tariffs maybe has been one of those things where I've had a little disagreement with him, but he's been on point, I believe, about a lot of things. And this is what he says. A lot of people thought there was going to be a fix in the housing market when the Fed dropped the interest rates, and yet it didn't happen. Okay, that's where we're sitting at now. They dropped the interest rates, didn't fix the housing mortgage interest rates, and then now people are saying, well, what's going on? How are we going to get out of this bubble that we have with the housing market? How are we going to solve this problem, right? And they're planning on dropping, the Fed is planning on dropping the interest rates, I think, 2 more times this year, potentially. And then Trump is really pushing them to drop it again in 2026. And so this is what Kevin O'Leary says. And this is a warning that I think we should heed. Okay. And Ryan, you can push back as much as you want. But he says the 4%, 3.5% mortgage rate is never coming back ever. That's what he says. It's never coming back. And that's what people are waiting for, to start buying again in the housing market. Right now it's at a standstill. Their houses aren't selling. People aren't buying. And he reminds us that America ran on a 7% mortgages for around 50 years. And if you actually go look at the data, you can see it. And the chart is crazy to see that when we were experiencing those really low interest rates, between 5 and 10 years ago, whenever it was, in that time frame, that was really kind of rare. And he mentions how these interest rates did not budge after the Fed dropped the bond market rates. And he says it's because there's other issues affecting it as well. Things like the deficit, inflation. He talked about some of the tariffs, especially when it comes to the building materials, for building new houses or fixing houses. He's saying those things are harder to get in some instances right now, and that could be part of the issue. He says the president can't fix this problem, and so obviously Trump's been pushing to lower the federal interest rates, and probably hoping that it'll fix and address some of the housing issues. But here's what I honestly believe. I believe that this is a problem for one group of people, and it's not a problem for another group of people, and it has nothing to do with your class, has nothing to do with your background, your ethnicity, has nothing to do even with your politics, honestly. So I'm gonna present my solution. How do you put yourself in the right group for where we're headed as a country? So any opening thoughts, Ryan? And then I want to jump into this other video because this is a video by Minority Mindset, and he brought up some really, really good points when it comes to what's happening right now with the housing market interest rates.
I mean, I think it makes sense that it's a multi-factor is what actually drives the housing interest rates. There's other things like he probably talked about is the job market, inflation, whatever's going on with debt, that sort of thing. Also the 10-year treasury yield and not just the Fed funds rate. And so there's other things there, but I don't know if it's interesting to think about. I'd have to think about it more to think about whether it would actually come down or not, but it does make sense. I mean, we're kind of all perpetually in unprecedented times these days. It does seem like everything there's some precedent in some of the individual things, and but the big picture, is there really a precedent for it? And so, I mean, I could see why he might draw that conclusion. But yeah, that's my initial thoughts, is that it's definitely, there's other factors involved in it.
I literally just opened my Gmail about an hour ago and saw this headline: U.S. economy grows 3.8% in second quarter. So the economy is actually growing right now, although the employment rate is not doing great at the moment, which is kind of strange. But we're seeing something interesting. What we're seeing is the job market's not growing like the Trump administration has been hoping, but a lot of the tariff deals have kind of been landing. A lot of them have been working better than especially the media expected. And then also, despite the job market issues, spending has been really strong in the U.S. And that's why I believe the headlines like this are popping up. U.S. economy grows 3.8% in the second quarter. So this is a very interesting take on the whole situation. And this is from Minority Mindset. He brings a very interesting perspective where he talks about a scenario. And according to him, this is likely a scenario where the house prices are not going to go back down, But if we can get the housing interest rates to drop a little bit, which he thinks is likely eventually, even though it didn't happen this time around, this is what he thinks is going to happen, is that it is going to cause an economic boom to an extent, but it's going to benefit, in one sense, the wealthy and not the general populace. But he put it in other terms. He said it's going to benefit those who are being financially smart right now, and those who are not being financially smart, it's going to actually hurt and put them in an even worse position. And the reason for all that is because if the housing prices stay high, then the equity is going to be in your house. So like if your house stayed at a certain cost or whatever, but the interest rates dropped, then a lot of people would refinance and they would say, okay, well, I'm going to find a better, because a lot of people have bought with high interest rates. They're going to say, well, I'm going to find a better lender, with a better interest rate now. I'm going to refinance at a lower rate. And then all of a sudden, they've got all this equity to work with in their house, and they can refinance and get some of that back as cash. And so a lot of the population of homeowners, if the prices stayed high and the interest rates dropped, could have a bunch of cash to work with all of a sudden. And one of the points he makes that I think is very critical right now is that what that's going to do is it's going to pump a lot of money back into the economy. The economy is going to keep growing, even though it's not necessarily going to help consumers, because consumers are going to lose out in the long run because they're losing their equity. They're losing, in some senses, some people's equity in their house is the only retirement fund they ever have, right? And so the point that he makes that I agree with, that I think is fantastic right now, is that if you're being smart with your money and if you're saving and you're investing, you're going to win, even if the housing market does not get better. Even if, technically none of this gets solved, and this is the hole we land ourselves in. This is the solution. If this happens, the answer is exactly what Proverbs 22:7 says: the rich rules over the poor and the borrower becomes the lender's slave. It's not, see, what Proverbs is talking about here is not talking about if you're rich, you're destined to succeed, and if you're poor, you're destined to stay poor. No, it's talking about the mindset of the individual. Do you have the mindset of a borrower or the mindset of a lender? Do you have the mindset of someone who's going to consume and use up every last penny, or the mindset of someone who's going to invest? And technically, if you're investing, guess what? You've just in some ways you become the lender. So it's like if you're saving and you're not using that, and even if you're just leaving that equity in your house, I mean, you're doing something positive for your future. So I think the solution is, don't spend your house equity. Don't refinance if you can get a lower, but don't pull out the cash. Don't waste that. Don't buy a car with credit. Don't rack up a bunch of debt on a credit card, because with the volatility of where we are right now, with all the things that are changing so fast, I think it's very unwise to lose out on an investment opportunity. Instead of putting it somewhere where you're going to get a positive return. Again, I guess I could quote the Bible all day long, but it says, cast your bread on the water, and after many days it will return to you. There's this idea of what happens when bread is in water is it soaks it up and it gets, it grows. It's like that idea. What do you think, Ryan? What are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think it's a great idea to refinance if you can get a better rate. I mean, obviously, you just do the math on that and see if it makes sense on whatever you have to spend to get the refinancing done. But yeah, if you're going to take money out, if you're not going to use that debt to generate income some other way, that's just consumer debt, and that doesn't really make sense. I mean, for most people, maybe it is to pay off consumer debt, and so then it's just another mortgage debt or more, less equity in their house. And so, I mean, I've leveraged different tools and things like that, but it's this. I think it's just interesting what he's saying is, basically, like you said, follow the biblical principles and the ways of living, and you're going to be better off.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I understand sometimes people have to leverage that, to move debt from a bad place to a slightly better place.
Yeah.
But I, just in general, it's like, what kind of mindset are we having, and it's like the future really is determined. Our future is determined by the mindset that we have today, like which direction we're going to head. And at this point in my life, I'm actually starting to think finally I'm 36. And for the first time last year, I started thinking I might want to retire someday, or at least be able to work less at some point when I get older, or whatever it is. It's like, I might want to do that. How do I think forward? How do I actually like start making small decisions today that affect my future in the long run?
Yeah.
And one of those things, one of the results of that has been, well, I'm going to stop spending money I don't have. I'm going to stop buying stuff on credit. I'm going to stop, and I'm going to start moving moving the needle the other direction. So I think it's a very, very good opportunity. We're in especially with a growing economy right now, despite where the job market is, very good opportunity for investors, not such a great opportunity for consumers. And so we need to clamp down on the consuming side of things and get creative with the investing side of things.
Yeah, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a retirement account, but it certainly need to be pushing money out into savings, or investment of some sort. I mean, I was just at a mastermind this week, and then we had somebody come and present on investments, and this guy's got hundreds of millions of dollars invested, and so he's giving advice on. And like most people around age 40, then they start thinking about, should probably start saving. But the reality of the financial world is that if someone does something for 5 years and then does nothing for 20 years, that money will be worth more than if they did nothing for 5 years and then invested for 20 years. So the lesson here is not to feel sad if you haven't done it. The lesson is start yesterday, like start now and do everything you can. And that is what you need to do. And then, what to do it in. Okay, well, that's a whole nother conversation and how to do it and that sort of thing. But it's just the mindset that comes with it. Like, I just have a sense that debt, in general, I've known debt is a bad idea, but I think even more today, I just have a sense that more debt is a even worse idea today. And somehow there's going to be some hooks or teeth or something from policy or, whatever it is. I just say less debt, the better. So the key is to, the old Dave Ramsey way, get out of debt. But the thing is, there's a mindset that comes along with it. So if that's your mindset, you just think differently about everything. I mean, it's kind of a little more frugal. It's not about being cheap. It's about being frugal and about having, investing in those things now, and then you're enjoying other things more, And so I think it's overall, that's definitely the way to go. And that's definitely needs to be a heart change in some cases. And sometimes people get into a situation where now they just really are with their back against the wall and there's nothing they can do. And so then they really have that, they have the change of mind, so they can start thinking to get out of debt and invest more. But we want to have that earlier. We need to be instilling that in our children. We need to, they need to have this financial stewardship abilities in their lives as well. And so, that's definitely the way to go. And so,
yeah, no, I think that's really good, Ryan. One last thing I want to add that I just thought of is that, like, a lot of, the U.S. we're printing more money again. I think tomorrow, the day after we recorded this, they're starting up the printing again. And it's just, it's crazy, and obviously that can add to inflation, what the government's doing, even lowering the rates right now, the decisions they're doing, that technically could add to inflation. You could potentially cause it to go higher. And, that to me, that's just another reason not to pull the equity out of your house. If you have a house, if you have some equity, if your equity's in your house, guess what? That's fighting against inflation. If you pull it out, and you got cash in your hand, now your money is losing to inflation, So
the house is the better store of value.
Yeah, you got to think about, where am I storing the wealth, that I've been able to build, and that God's given me the ability to build, and how am I stewarding that, and whether that's whether it's like $100, or $100,000, whatever, it's like making wise decisions with what I have,
You said, like, when you put money in the bank, you are sort of becoming a lender. And that is true, because the bank then can lend that money. And actually, there's something called fractional reserve lending, which is insane. But that's where the bank can actually lend out 10 times more than the money it has on deposit. So that means if Troy comes and gives $100,000 to the bank, and I go and get a loan from that bank for $1 million, and then I go take that money and put it in another bank, $1 million, and then they can loan out $10 million. So you see money is just created out of thin air. And that is the system we have in the United States today. So save your money, invest it.